Chris Biderman, thanks for joining us here. We appreciate the time, my friend. We know you're busy this week. Let's start with Kyle Shanahan today. Any surprise that the head coach was so clear earlier today on naming Trey Lance QB1?
No, there wasn't any surprise. I think this has been the team's thinking really since March when they made it apparent that they wanted to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and trade him away. I know Kyle Shanahan publicly what he said has been about keeping possibilities open. I think some of that is just when you're trying to trade a quarterback, you don't want to seem desperate to get rid of him, and you want to make sure you keep all the leverage you could possibly have in trade discussions. And the 49ers, frankly, kind of lost all that leverage when Garoppolo had to have surgery, making him unavailable for trade, because teams aren't going to trade for a guy who can't pass a physical, who they haven't seen throw, and they don't necessarily know the extent of the injury. So now Jimmy Garoppolo took his physical this afternoon. We haven't heard any news about whether he passed or failed that, but I think the 49ers are expecting him to pass that physical and then potentially engage in trade talks. But, again, this isn't a quarterback market that's super robust for Jimmy Garoppolo right now, so I think the team might be in a holding pattern for a little bit, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if ultimately the resolution ends up being that the team cuts Garoppolo and lets him pick his destination rather than try to get something else from another team in a trade. So, but no, it wasn't a surprise, Shanahan. I think even, going back to the drafts when they took Trey Lance in 2021, it was clear that this day was going to come, and now it's actually official. There's no more cloak and dagger stuff going on. The 49ers are moving on, and Trey Lance is now the starting quarterback.
So then you said engage in trade talks. Are there trade talks to engage in, or are they just, to use a football term, playing out the clock now until the inevitable cutting of Jimmy Garoppolo at this point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wish I knew the answer. John Lynch has not been too revealing when it comes to what conversations he's having with which teams throughout the league. But, I think the Cleveland Browns would certainly make sense given the uncertainty facing Deshaun Watson. And if he gets suspended for a substantial amount of time, will they be the ones to make a play for Jimmy Garoppolo, knowing that they have a roster that's capable of going to the playoffs, and whether it's half a season or a full season, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo gives them the best chance to compete in the AFC North. I think one interesting element of this, too, is timing, because ultimately if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be in the mix for a starting job somewhere, that team acquiring him and Jimmy Garoppolo himself would probably want to get this done as soon as possible, so we can get acclimated as quickly as possible to what system he's running, the organization, what city he'd be moving to, all of those things. So all that stuff is very much up in the air, and for the 49ers, I mean, they've been holding out hope that they can get something for Garoppolo, but I think ultimately the biggest thing for them is to get his $25 million off the salary cap, off their books, and once they can do that, maybe that'll give them a little bit more clarity in terms of what the exact structure could look like for a Deebo Samuel contract. And a Nick Bosa deal is coming down the pipeline at some point over the next year, and that's going to be a big one. Could potentially be $30 million a season. So the 49ers, really the most important thing for them now is to just figure out how they're going to offload Jimmy Garoppolo's contract. And I think ultimately they're going to get to a realization where, it's not going to be worth it to them to potentially hold on to Garoppolo for too long, because that offer for a decent draft pick isn't out there, on top of all the financial stuff that goes along with potentially trading Garoppolo and other teams wanting the 49ers to pick up some salary. It might just be easiest and cleanest for them to cut bait, and they could sell it in a way that says, hey, we want to do right by Jimmy by allowing to pick his next destination.
Chris Biderman is with us here from the Sacramento Bee. The other player that was talked about a lot today, Chris, was Deebo Samuel. Kyle Shanahan sounded very confident that a deal was going to get done. John Lynch later met with the media and you guys and doubled down on that. What kind of deal, if it does get done, should we expect with Deebo Samuel and the Niners? What will that look like?
I think A.J. Brown's deal with something similar to that would make a lot of sense. I think it was, 4 years and $100 million just about, with more than half of that guaranteed. I think Deebo Samuel's certainly looking for something like that. I also wonder, what about Deebo Samuel's role is going to impact these negotiations, because there have been multiple reports about Samuel not being thrilled with the idea that he would be used as a running back as often as he was last year, and just the punishment his body took, and how banged up he was towards the end of the season and in the playoffs. And you remember that Packers game when he went off the field, and then he took a hit over the middle in the NFC Championship game and was down for a little bit, and so I think Deebo is thinking about his long-term viability. And just what kind of punishment he wants to put his body through. And on the other hand, Kyle Shanahan probably isn't going to let a player dictate what he does schematically, and he doesn't want to be limited with the plays he can call and the personnel groupings he can use. So I think, one thing the 49ers did do was they used a third-round pick on Tyrion Davis-Price, the running back from LSU, who potentially could ease some of the burden off Deebo Samuel, particularly in the running game, right? But it'll be interesting to see, because I'm not under the impression that this is going to be an easy fix. Like, I don't think there's just a number that the 49ers are going to be willing to get to that also satisfies Samuel, and there could be some incentive structure that the 49ers could throw out there, and if he gets a certain amount of carries or whatever, then they give him some bonus of some sort. That those type of things do exist, but based on how this offseason has gone, it doesn't seem like an easy resolution's in sight. I do expect the deal to get done, but I just don't know how quickly it's going to come, or if Deebo Samuel's going to be practicing tomorrow when the team has its first practice.
Yeah, we've had this trend, and TJ Watt was one who did it, of a play, not a holdout, but a hold in, where a guy will report to camp, but then just not practice. And I guess that way he avoids fines. Is that what we're likely looking at here with Deebo Samuel?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because that's more or less what he did for mandatory OTAs. Is that he was there in the facility, but he was just on the sideline with his teammates, and he had a play sheet. He knew what plays were getting called. He was talking to his teammates and coaches. So he was very much part of the team, but he wasn't actually on the field practicing in the drills. So I think that's something that would be a reasonable expectation, assuming things don't go too sour in negotiations and he gets offended and decides to leave. But I don't think it's going to go that direction. I would imagine a hold-in scenario would make sense. And also, if I think with the way these teams sort of approach training camp in the preseason, if Deebo Samuel misses a week or two, it's not going to be the end of the world, because it's not like he's going to be playing much, if at all, in preseason games, right? The 49ers are going to use August to really get the team ready for the regular season, not try to run them into the ground, before the regular season starts. So there's going to be a casual ramp-up period, and I think the team understands that if it does take a few weeks for Deebo Samuel's contract to get done, it wouldn't be the end of the world, just as long as he's ready and in shape for the regular season.
Chris, we appreciate the time again. Let's do this again soon, my man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. There goes Chris Biderman from the Sacramento Bee and the Candlestick